Yeah. So I took the code position March 19th of this year. Previous to that, I was in dispatch, so it was an easy transition. But March 19th, if you look at the top until now, that's when the stats start for me. I've pulled a total of 770 calls for service. That counts as on-view violations. That counts as phone calls. Someone stopping me on the street as a consensual contact. That's how those stats came up. So I've taken only 293 phone calls from citizens saying that there's weeds or there's dogs. So I didn't do the math on that, and I'm not very good at math, but just subtract the 770 minus the 293, and that's how many I've done on view. So that's me, myself, going down an alley, looking at houses for weeds, trash, junk vehicles. I've pulled 110 total weed cases. And like Joe was saying, I can go down, so I'll give you an example. 14th in Smithland to 10th in Smithland. I went down that alley, I pulled 65 cases in that one alley. So I can, at minimum, I can pull 17 cases in an alley. And it's hard, but I have drive because I don't want my city to look like a forest. You look at these weeds, they're terrible, they're bad. Previous to me was an officer that we used to have. She no longer works here, but I pulled her stats from 1-1. I gave her a little extra credit, and to 318 because she actually didn't technically start taking code until I think the 15th of January in 2024. But I pulled her calls. She had a total of 129 calls for 3 months, and I didn't go through and look for phone calls on view, but she pulled 4 weed violations, 7 trash violations, 69 junk vehicles, 23 animal calls, 4 municipal code violations, and 3 parking violations. I mean, that's just someone, in my opinion, that's here to do their job, not, they don't care about it. I mean, I care about what I do. I was talking to the chief of police. I'm going to the academy in August, so there won't be a code enforcement officer unless we can get someone hired. And then I told the chief if I would be willing to come back to code enforcement after the academy to do that. It's called the police officer 2 position. So it'll be police officer and code enforcement, but my main job is code enforcement. So I mean, just from the 319 to now, I have 428 cases total, and that's a lot. I'm staying extra. I have to watch my overtime. I mean, on my dashboard right now before I go home, I have 25 cases I need to get done. So, I mean, it's a lot, and someone extra.
And I just want to add that when he does a weed issue, that doesn't mean that the weeds disappear like that.
No.
You know, that's just them getting their...
Yeah, so I can go into that. So, weeds... So there has to be a letter that's sent out by the city. So when I go to... we'll use the PD. 601 Colorado. I go there for an on-view weed violation. I pull up. I have to enter into my phone. I have an app. It's a little portal I put all the case numbers and everything that I do. Keeps track of it, what's open and what's closed. So I enter it into that system, and then I have to write a citation because we don't do warnings anymore for weeds or trash. It's strictly penalty assessments. So I have to write the citation out, and then I have to enter it into we have an Excel spreadsheet that has to be entered and kept up. So I have to enter into that, and then I have to come back, do my report, and then I give her, that's Melanie Schofield, a piece of paper that says this address at this time, this officer, this case number, whether there was a ticket issued, yes or no, and then what it is, if it's weeds or trash. We have to send out an official letter. They had 7 days to fix the violation, so cut the weeds or pick up the trash. If they don't, then the city will hire a contractor, I believe, to go take care of it. And then...
And they pay the ticket?
They can pay the ticket to go to court.
It's up to them.
It's up to them what they want to
Yeah, then it's then it goes into the municipal
And then
court
the
system.
judge will figure out what to do from there if they want to go to court.
Is that correct, Aaron? No, so it's not like, hey, he wrote a ticket and they're gone, right? That's not how that works. So sometimes people are like, well, you know, he didn't even do anything on weeds. They're all over the place. Well, number one, he's one person, but number two, he may have written a ticket and a violation, but they just haven't done anything about it.
And I mean, people are allowed to come request reports, like records of it. So I mean, they're allowed if they really want to know what is being done and what isn't being done. They're more than welcome to come to the PD and request records for code enforcement.
It all falls underneath the Open Records Act.
Yeah.
Something we talked about today with me and Colby and the chief is maybe getting creative in how they can report that to you, whether we get like a tip line for just code violations or a form that's someone could just drop off and say, however that is, because you know we want to make it easier for him or whoever that next person is. It's really a thankless job. No one really likes to see the code guy. So I really thank Colby for doing that because he does care about it and he's doing a great job. And I'm sad that you're going to the academy and maybe leaving this job because that's what does happen sometimes. We get really good code people in, and the next step is to go to the academy. So
Yeah. I mean.
But I like your idea of maybe doing both.
Yeah, I mean, like I told the chief, I wouldn't mind. It wouldn't be a big deal if I did. But and then I was gonna go in on the dog call too, because so if you call, someone calls, and you can report anonymously too. I don't know if people know that, but you are allowed to call the police and not tell them your name or your phone number. They can't turn you down and say, "Oh, we don't want to take that call." They can't do that. But so animal calls are tricky. If it's a stray dog, I have to first of all spend 30 minutes trying to catch this thing because they don't like anybody.
They just don't come to you.
Right. So
That's mine. Just open the car door.
so we have to try and catch the dog, and then depending if we get the dog or not, we have to take it to the industrial park out in North Carolina that's where our shelter's located. Because they're all the way out there, and then we have to write the citation, the intake log, and then we have to fill out a new form that the state requires that we fill out with all the information that we know. So we have to it's down to like the sex of the dog and the color and breed and all kinds of stuff. So I'm out there for at least, I would say 45 minutes to an hour to be safe per dog call. So, I mean, and then that doesn't count on here it just says animal calls. We have animal bites, animal strays, animal missing. We have a missing call type for them. We have livestock, wildlife, traps. So, I mean, there's so much that goes into animals. I just felt it was a time saver to put animal calls. So.
Yeah.
So, what do people need to know about animal calls that, like, we could be better citizens and not? I mean, it seems like an incredible use of your time. Like, what I feel like La Venta has it dialed in on, like, little dog at 6th in their town. Like, it's amazing to me the network that goes out when people find lost dogs.
I mean,
but what can we do better or encourage people to do better?
Doing what they're doing. I can't tell you to try and catch the dog and put it in your yard, because if I tell you to catch the dog and it bites you, now who's liable for that?
Yeah.
So I mean, if you do what you're doing, call and report it. Don't keep the dog and the dog bite one of your kids, and then you call and say, "Well, I picked up this dog.
Yeah.
We can't take it now because you claimed ownership of the dog, and now we can't take relinquished dogs." That's something the city's had for a long time. I just call it in. I mean, don't be afraid to call. I don't know if you shouldn't have to worry about people getting upset with you for calling law enforcement.
Every call that comes in is recorded,
Yeah.
so it's it's dated, it's time-stamped and everything, so sometimes there's rumors out there of, well, I called, they never came. Well, that's not true. I mean, if you call, it's going to get dispatched, maybe a little bit, depending on what event's going on or how backed up Colby may be,
Yeah.
but everything does get processed at all, but that phone call has to be made,
And
that's the big thing.
so another thing too is people think that code enforcement is Monday through Friday to 5. It's not. It's 24/7. Our officers
Our code
are code
enforcement
enforcement
officers.
officers. So if you have a dog at 3 o'clock in the morning, if you were just up and saw a dog outside, you can call the cops and they'll come pick up the dog.
If someone's dog gets picked up, do they have to pay to get him out?
Yes. So there's a step process for that. It's a $50 fine the first time, $150 I think the second time, and $300 for the third time. And then it's the same $300 every time that dog in the same year. So say in January your dog got locked up, and then March, and then now November, then you have to pay $300 to get him out the third time.
Colby, could I clarify
I was
that
going to say,
too?
please.
The dog, affectionately we talk about the dog jail.
Oh,
And so,
yeah,
you
sorry.
know, you're
Sorry.
paying to get the dog out of jail, but you're still going to have a ticket.
Yes,
So let's be
yes,
careful with
yes.
the numbers that we give in case the public
Yeah.
misunderstands that that dollar amount that is paid to the shelter is not the same as the penalty
Right.
that you would pay for the
The
city.
ticket's going to always be the same. It's always depending on what you're charged with. If the dog doesn't have a, so you have to, your dogs have to have a collar with a rabies tag on it. And if it's out and about, it doesn't have that, you're going to get charged with two charges. It's going to be dog at large, and then I think it's licensed to be attached, I think is the other charge. So it's a $100 ticket if you get charged with both of those, plus the $5 surcharge, so $105. That'll always stay the same. It'll never change. The only thing,
It's the price at
the shelter.
pound, at the pound
Yeah.
or the shelter that increases
Yeah.
on the
Right.
times in a year.
The other thing to say about the 105 prices, it is consistent right now. It does not have to always stay the same. It is a dialogue that I've
Maybe
had
council
with
code,
multiple people asking me whether or not the fines are in keeping with everything. And so as the city attorney, I'm also responsible for prosecuting these municipal tickets when they come through, but I'm not responsible for setting the fines. So Colby's absolutely correct that those numbers are consistent regardless of the number of times your dog is at large, but that is not something that has to stay static. It's just consistent, not will never change, as in we couldn't change it, you couldn't change it. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Colby.
No, you're okay.
So the fines that are processed, I'm assuming that we hope that it pays for your position. And no, like, are we even close to paying for the cost of enforcing with our fines at this point?
So I'm speaking off the cuff. This is the sort of thing that Eliza would
Yeah.
have numbers on. At one point, after first getting here, I looked at, because the charter dictates, so this is not something we have a choice about in terms of our city government. We have to have the municipal court. So you were asking, do the fines cover for Colby's job? But there are other comparisons as well. Do the fines cover the cost of even keeping the municipal court? That would mean
Yep.
the contract for Judge Manley, the contract for people who work with Judge Manley, in this case Cassie Sanchez. And what I've gently been told is, no, those numbers don't match up, but when I interviewed Chief Quick about this, he was explaining that it has long been the position of the council, and of course you can correct me because you're here, but it has long been the position of the council that the deterrence was what was important, and that deterrence for the behaviors or the weeds and other ordinances was worth the difference in the price between paying for the services and getting the fines back. Does that answer?
Yeah, I'm just thinking if I'm curious to check our fine schedule to see if it's on par with other communities, or, I mean, if we're, I think this is a very important piece of what we do, but it would be nice if the violations approach somewhat the cost of the deterrent.
And-
Well, it's not only deterrence, it's voluntary compliance. The threat of a fine, if your neighbor gets a weed ticket, hopefully you would go out and take care of whatever problem it is. So, I have seen tickets for 1 mile over the posted speed limits, heavily enforced in some communities. We don't turn to a police officer and say, go write your paycheck and fines. Be prepared for this building to be filled up and sign out the door and wrapped around at one time.
And putting them in a bad.
You become a wagon mountain New Mexico, and there goes tourism, because people, once you be known as a ticket or a speed trap, people boom. Obey the speed limit through your community and then drive as fast away from it as possible.
Yeah.
That's just speed.
Should not rely on tickets or fines to pay for anything. And I can tell you, being a municipal police officer in multiple jurisdictions, the dog at large ticket is on par with everybody else.
And when I went to the Citizens Police Academy, I did talk to the police chief about maybe we need to revisit the fines just to make sure that we're in line, not only with the animal, but across the board.
I don't think necessarily it's the $50 is $50. I mean, I think we're using this ticket though as a deterrent, right? That's the whole goal of this ticket, is to be a deterrent. So why would I be deterred by having to pay $50 every time my dog gets out? I mean, it's the same thing for trash. I mean, there's people who take the tickets, they will pay the tickets, they will keep claiming tickets instead of cleaning up their mess. So if we want a deterrent, why can't we have a step program for our citations, for our fine? So because you start at the 50, and then you didn't do it the first time, so your second time it's the $100 or the 150 or the 125, whatever we go to, and then the third time it's that. By that time it's going to be high, and they don't want to keep paying the $200 every time, so they're going to clean up their mess. That's what the deterrent system would do. In my eyes, I don't know. I'm not very familiar with it, but
This is a work session. You guys can just talk. That's what we're here for.
I think that's a possibility, and visiting that isn't, a big issue. You can say that it's on par, but let's look at it and see that it's on par. And, that I feel probably the people we're dealing with are the same people we're dealing with over and over on some of these issues. So maybe, in that sense of it, a step up in some of that will become more of a deterrent for them, to actually deal with it. But I feel like a majority of the people we deal with are probably the same people we deal with over and over. So.
And I'll agree with you there, Damon. We'll use an example. A couple properties in town, it's the same ones over and over. $50, they come in, they pay their fine. $50. Now we get into a hoarding situation. Then other things could happen on top of that. So it's something that we probably definitely need to look at.
Speaking of hoarding, okay,
Yep.
There is no fire code for residential. Is that correct? For storing numerous things on.
When it gets into residential, it's kind of an off limits. I wouldn't say off limits, but there's not a lot of enforcement. Fire codes are for public buildings, public right-of-ways, things like that, commercial buildings, industrial, such. But when it comes to residential, the only thing that really the fire code covers is if you have a type of house that has people with disabilities in it, such as some of the houses that Inspiration Fields has, it has to have a sprinkler system because of the type of client or the personnel living in the house. But when it comes to fire code and things like that, there's not a lot that we rely back on to the code enforcement of the weeds and the trash and stuff like that, but fire code, no.
Wouldn't that become like their own insurance would basically...
That follows underneath that, yes.
And then just lastly, Cole, because we got to get moving on. The code, if you guys have all read the code, the municipal code, I have this great book that Dean had made me, and I think we have it scanned in so we can put it on the website whenever we get that rocking and rolling. This book tells me, okay, what's the code, what's the offense, who should be the next one to notify, like who's the first one to notify. A lot of it is outdated, okay? I think maybe Mrs. Harris would agree with me. And that's why I put the dead trees on here too, because it says that the city manager is the one to go and look for a dead tree. That's what our code says. So I'm thinking that Brad's not doing that, and I'm also thinking that Rick wasn't doing that before that. So, maybe we look at some of these like that, and there's another one that says the director of public safety should be doing a whole list of things. And I'm not saying, I think at some point we got away from it, and it's really hard to enforce. I also think that these were probably written for a time that is not the time we live in today. The junk vehicle one, for instance. If you have, what is the correct word for car cover? What do we use?
So it's a fully enclosed structure.
A fully enclosed structure. Or if you look at the definition, it says a custom car, automobile
fully enclosed
cover.
structure includes garages, a fenced-in area with a 6-foot privacy fence that you can't see through, and then a custom car-fitted cover.
Not a tarp.
Not a tarp. Tarp used to be, but no longer is a thing.
But when this code was written,
I custom fit it.
but
That's something that the
Custom
judges
fitted tarp.
have to talk about. I don't know.
But when this code was written, I think, we thought maybe, and I can't speak for who wrote it, I think maybe they thought maybe there would be 2 or 3 cars that maybe someone had in here. Some of these yards are having 10 plus vehicles, and now they're just going to put covers on them, and that's not really fair to the neighborhood, So I think maybe we look at putting a max at someone on something like that. But that's just, I think this code was well-intentioned, but it doesn't fit our times right now. So stuff like that, I think we should probably start looking at, and what would the process be for just updating stuff like that, Mrs. Harris?
Well, quickly, let me make a point to earlier, and then we'll come back to it. One of the other things that we probably want to be looking at, because in general, it would be, I would call it an audit, but that makes it sound scary, a review of what we have and what we might need to change. And certainly this work session has begun that, and some of it would be to review the ordinances themselves, the definitions. It sounds like we'd need to go to that. We'd be talking with folks like Colby who've been in the field and looking at what changes he's seeing and what might be useful. But I think we may also want to interview someone like Cassie who's working with the municipal judge. Because the other point I was going to point out is not only are our fines always consistent at the 105 or lower, but we have a collection policy that means whether we choose to continue to do this or not is not on me. I'm just telling you what it is. In the past, the city has believed that it could be too onerous for a party to have to pay the whole thing or to have interest that accrues and so on. And there's generally a belief that accepting any payment at all means they'll pay something versus maybe not paying. But if we were really going to be looking at increasing the fines, there would be no reason to do that if we didn't also look at whether collection of the money could be followed through on the other side. So taking a macro look, we look at the statutes, we look at the enforcement now, we look at the changes we want, and then we analyze, because I think there have been some good points over here, that we analyze whether the ideas we have to fix it really will do it or whether they'll create a problem that we're not anticipating. Can we survey other cities our size or our financial level and see whether or not the outcome could be consistent? But if we were going to do sort of a structured look at updating versus more of a reactionary, if we see that Facebook has lots of comments on something, then we react by looking at a particular ordinance. But if we were to do more a step-by-step, I think with apologies to Colby for one more thing on your list, I'm going to be recommending to the council that I would be looking at the frequency of calls that you're receiving, because I want to thank you for giving us this data breakdown. And I probably would prioritize those that are getting the most calls. Make sure that we believe that those are efficient and that we are executing the process from the ticketing all the way through the prosecution and the collection, doing that in a way that the council believes is appropriate. But I think it feels like a really big job if we say we're just going to start soup to nuts and do the whole thing. So I think we might prioritize these and then ask ourselves what we want to do next.
Does that sound fair to everybody?
Yeah, well, and I agree. We need Elisa's input. Like, it would be interesting to know of the 110 weed violations. I mean, we couldn't do it with this data. Maybe older data, like how many actually are paid.
Right.
Sometimes, like what percent are actually paid?
when it is this is also something that both Cassie and Eliza would discuss with you, because the difference is that Cassie is not a city employee. So Cassie may collect the money, she will make a tally against the debt owed to the municipal judge part of our system, and then she will take that money and give it to Eliza.
But they're not tied to
They're not,
citations?
they're not, what Eliza has won't be tied to what happened. And what happened is often tied just to the list of debts that still may be standing. In fact, for an illustration that I believe is fair, since it was shown to me, there is one filing cabinet that is in the small office there on the first floor that's part of the municipal building where you do pay your tickets. There's a whole 4-drawer filing cabinet, and when I was getting a tour of the space, Cassie said, "These are where we keep the unpaid tickets. This is where they're stored." And I was surprised to see that there are that many, but we just
don't have a mechanism at this point for doing anything about it.
What we do at the moment is we set up a payment plan, and that payment plan is what people can pay and what they'll agree to pay. And then when they comply, the balance goes down. And when they don't comply, there may be a warrant issued, but the warrant is not necessarily going to be actionable because it may not be wide-reaching. It may be only within the municipality, and it may not be something that others are ever going to be able to act on.
There's no minimum, is there?
There is no minimum
No,
for
so
the
because
amount.
I've seen stuff for $1 just getting paid.
That's
Whatever-
right.
Just whatever somebody has agreed to come in to pay.
Yes.
As long as they're
So
making
you can have a
it.
$300 ticket and pay $1 on it every month.
Yes. Now, to be fair, in 2007, 2008, which is the last time I was really aware of what fines were like in the county court, that was the same policy that judicial had in the county court, was that you could have a payment plan of repaying any amount, but we didn't dictate how much the minimum was. We would need to double check that. I am feeling my age as I tell you that was the last time I knew. We would want to check to see if the modern judicial process was the same.
Well, and more important, if somebody has a $300 ticket that they've only paid $1 on, is do they still have weeds? I mean, that would be the question that I would have. Like,
Okay.
you know, if they've cleaned up, then I have less of a problem with them paying $1 at a time.
The problem can be, though, that take weeds. That situation can recur and recur, and no one knows this better than Colby.
Yeah.
But the one violation is long gone, and so that $300 that you may be paying down is from 3 years ago. Your weeds have frozen and regrown for a couple of years by then.
Thank you, Colby, for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.